Hello everybody and welcome to Jeff the Pharmacist. So the other evening I was watching a show on Netflix called Dirty Money Drug Short.
You see how greedy this move looks.
Yeah, I could see how it looks greedy, but I think there's a lot of altruistic properties to it.
Martin Shkreli rashly raised the price of Daraprim from $13.50 a pill to $750.
I was sitting with an investor who was complaining to me about how awful and unethical Martin Shkreli's actions were in hiking up the price of Daraprim. And I looked at this investor and said, well, why is what Valiant's doing any different? And he looked at me and said, well, that's a good question. I mean, if Martin was the minnow in all of this, then Valiant's CEO, Mike Pearson, was the whale.
So it kind of perked my ears up a little bit because I am a pharmacist and I have dealt with drug pricing issues extensively. I've certainly been yelled at about drug prices. I have had people crying about drug prices. I have I've had combative people over drug prices, and I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what they were addressing in Drug Short. So Drug Short is about the efforts, mostly about the efforts of a lady named Fatima Qadir, and I'm sorry, Miss Qadir, if I messed your name up, but basically her whole project was to short the crap out of a company called Valiant, which was this high-rising pharmaceutical company whose business model was kind of this ignoble business model, not really kind of a slimy business model, if you ask me. I think if you are in a company, you should be out there to solve your customers' problems. And Valiant's kind of business model was more of a kind of a hedge fund kind of a business model where you treat drugs as assets and you kind of acquire them. A Valiant led by Michael Pearson would acquire the rights to certain drugs and then raise the prices of those drugs astronomically, and the impact on patients' lives was devastating. So Martin Shkreli did the same thing. Martin Shkreli is kind of this easy to hate kind of character, and I don't know if it was fair for everybody's rage to go against Martin Shkreli, because he took one product, Daraprim, and he raised the price of the drug astronomically. Martin Shkreli took that product as CEO of Turing Pharmaceuticals from $13.50 a tablet to $750 a tablet. And that kind of led to him being known as the bad boy of pharma and the pharma bro, and he kind of had around the clock news coverage sort of bashing him, and he seemed to relish all the hate bestowed upon him in kind of a strange way. I think he was kind of just picked on in terms of what he was doing was bad, obviously, but I think he was kind of picked on as a sort of a scapegoat of a phenomenon that was occurring in the pharmaceutical industry, and that is drug hikes. And you can ask any pharmacist, drug price hikes, and you can ask any pharmacist and they'll tell you that prices of drugs are just going way up. And it's not like in keeping with the price of milk. I mean, they're going up 10-20% a year on products that have been around for 100 years in some cases. So there's a lot of nonsense that goes on with regard in the pharmaceutical industry with regard to drug pricing. So I have kind of a few examples. The first one is the drug called Colchris. Colchris is colchicine. Colchicine has been around since the ancient Greek times. We synthesized it in the West in 1820s, and it became a drug that people could take in the 1820s for gout. Fast forward to the 2000s, and this was 9 cents a tablet for colchicine. Fast forward to the 2000s, the FDA has a new program called the Unapproved Drugs Initiative, And their goal was to take drugs that had never been approved. So these were drugs that went back a long, long time, had been used safely for a very long time. There were tons of studies about them, but they had never gone through the official FDA process. So a company called URL Pharma took advantage of this. And what they did is they said, okay, well, we'll put it through the new drug application. We'll go through the motions with the FDA. And when it came out, they had a monopoly on a drug that had been out for 200 years. So patients that had gout and they were used to going to their pharmacy, it was on the $9.99 list. They could pay $10 for a 90-day supply of colchicine. All of a sudden, they had to pay $4.85 a tablet. And what bothers me about stuff like this, and it occurred in the asthma market as well, if you look at asthma drugs like albuterol and other steroids, they've been around for so long. And what occurred was, you know, in the 90s when I was a little kid taking these drugs, I had a generic inhaler and it was cheap. And now you have to pay, you know, maybe $60 for albuterol. For the steroid inhalers, it could be $300-400 for a 30-day supply. And it's really stuff that's been around forever. And what occurred in the asthma market was the government said that the propellant used inside of these inhalers were causing the ozone layer to collapse or whatever. So they had to reformulate the product and go through the whole patent process again. So they had 8 years on the patent and they could treat albuterol like it was some new invention. To me, that's wrong, because if you, in my mind, if you're creating a new product, I'm more okay with people who are creating, or companies that are creating a new product and saving people's lives, than if the drug company is just you know, playing games and trying to make money with the regulatory system, which is, you know, which is their right. You know, it's absolutely their right to do that. But the same thing occurs with insulin. Insulin has been around since the 1920s, and they come up with the new iterations of the same thing every 7 years to stay on patent, and they drop the old products, and the generic companies haven't really been able to keep up, because making insulin is a lot more complicated. So what you have is patients that are having to pay $500 a month, $1,000 a month because they have diabetes. And even if they are covered under Medicare Part D, if they hit the donut hole, they're out several $1,000s a month. Or a lot of people have these whopping deductibles now because of companies like Valiant that have taken products that were $5 or $10 for a 30-day supply, and making them $21,000 for a 30-day supply. So it's you know, it's pretty crazy. And the drug that the Netflix special was talking about was called Cyprin. So Valiant got killed in the market because of Hillary Clinton talking about it.
She has to take a brand name drug. She's been taking it since the early 1980s. At that time, back in the 1980s, for the same drug, it cost approximately $180 for 10 shots. The latest refill she received from her pharmacy was $14,729.99 for the same 10 vials. And the company is one of these companies that is absolutely gouging American consumers and patients. It's called Valiant Pharmaceuticals. I'm going after them. We are going to stop this. This is predatory pricing. It is unjustified. It is wrong. And we're going to make sure it is stopped.
And also because of short sellers kind of talking about it in an investigation about a relationship that they had with the pharmacy that was supposedly fraudulent, but it's a relationship that I think exists with other companies. And that drug is still $6,000 a month. And Valiant, even though all these controversies, is still making a lot of money on these patients. So what annoys me as a pharmacist is what I see is a lot of money being made by pharmaceutical companies, but not a lot of value being given to patients. So they're using kind of a crony capitalist system that we have, relationships with the FDA, new initiatives by the FDA to basically stick it to patients, and patients are always the ones that are footing the bill. And they'll say, well, patients are protected by their insurance companies, but that's not always the case. A lot of times insurance companies won't cover a drug, or patients will be within this huge deductible, like a $10,000 deductible, and they'll have to pay out of pocket the full price of the medication. So they might be paying $500 a month for insulin, which is a product that was invented in the 1920s. And if you wanted to buy that old product, which if it was still around, it would probably be pretty cheap, the animal-based insulins, you wouldn't even be able to do that. So I'm seeing more and more where new drug innovations are not helping patients, especially in retail pharmacy. So the new innovations in products, they're higher strengths, or maybe they have to inject a little bit less liquid, but these are not life-saving innovations, and I think they're just sucking money out of the pockets of patients. So I hope you guys found this interesting. Please like my video and please subscribe. Thanks a lot.